Penguins forward Drew O'Connor filed for salary arbitration on Wednesday. I'm going to get into what that means for the Penguins coming up right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So on Wednesday, Drew O'Connor was one of 22 NHL players to file for salary arbitration. And if you don't know what that is, it's very, and I mean very easy to understand. Basically, if a case goes to arbitration, a third-party arbiter gets to decide what a player's salary is for this upcoming season. A arbiter gets to hear the case from both the player side, who is probably asking for a bit of a higher salary, and from the team side, who is going to go for a little bit of a lower salary to, of course, save some money. And after the arbiter hears the case, the person deliberates for about 2 days and then makes his or her decision. So that person gives the player whatever money that person feels is right, and that's a salary that the player will have heading into the season. There is a small thing where the team can decline to pay the player that kind of money, but that is rarely ever seen. And honestly, my friends, it is rare when cases go to arbitration at this point. There was only one salary arbitration case in the NHL last season. Most of these players and teams don't like it to get to that point, so they settle before the arbitration date. The arbitration dates this year are from July 20th until August 4th. So 2 weeks from today is when it opens, and then it will be done on August 4th. Penguins forward Drew O'Connor, again, the only one to file for salary arbitration. And the Penguins, they will agree to a deal with O'Connor well before that case. $750K he made this past season. I think on a 2-year deal, you're probably looking at something like $900K per season, upwards of $1 million, maybe $1.1 million per season, something like that. This should be a pretty easy contract for the Penguins to sign. Another big thing that this does do for the Penguins is that this will open up a second buyout window. So say Drew O'Connor actually signs with the Penguins on Thursday, so today. The second buyout window will open on Sunday, so 3 days after Drew O'Connor signs his contract with the Penguins, and then it will close 48 hours after that, so on Tuesday. So maybe if he signs Friday, it opens up on Monday, closes on Wednesday. So the Penguins will have another opportunity to use a buyout if they want to on a player, maybe like a Mikael Granlund, like a Jeff Petrie if he's still there, like a Jan Rutta, something like that. Even though it's unlikely at this time that the Penguins will use one, considering that they did not use a buyout during the normal scheduled window from June 16th until June 30th, it's still an option for them, especially if they do go through with an Erik Karlsson deal and the Sharks agree to send him to the Penguins. If they're not able to dump as much salary in that deal, they can maybe get some cap space by buying out someone like Granlund, getting for an extra $4 million. You can be 10% over the cap during the offseason. You just have to be cap compliant after training camp and the preseason ends. So that could be an instance where the Penguins get some salary cap space if they want to, if Granlund is still on the team. But at this point, my friends, I think it will be kind of unlikely if the Penguins were to use a buyout during that second window. As for O'Connor, again, I expect this to be a relatively short-term deal and a cheap deal. 25 years old, coming off a 5-goal, 11-point season. It's time to find out what the Penguins have in this player. When I have gone through some of like my mock offseason lineups, he is in my full-time lineup, kind of battling for that final spot with Alex Nylander at this time. They got to see what they have in him. I liked his play in spurts this past season. I thought he played decently well down the stretch. Didn't have the production to show it, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. He was firing a lot of pucks at the net, but just wasn't getting rewarded. I think my favorite game of his this past season was the game down in Tampa Bay late in the season. There was one where Jason Zucker won in overtime, but before that, O'Connor goes backhand, forehand, glove side on Andrei Vasilevsky, shades of Jordan Staal on Brian Rafalski during the 2009 Stanley Cup final between the Penguins and the Red Wings. Looks just like that. He has the skill to play in the bottom six on an NHL team. It's all about him being consistent enough on the Penguins for a full 82 game season. When he was on the ice this past season, the underlines were pretty solid. When he was on the ice, the Penguins controlled 52.3% of the shot attempts, 53.5% of the expected goal share, 50.7% of the scoring chances, and 51% of the high danger chances. I can also add 57% of the high danger goals for. And he didn't really play with that much talent down in the bottom six. It'll be a bit better for him this year. Even though the bottom six is not that good, it's still better than last year's bottom six. He'll be playing with the likes of maybe Noel Acciari. I think that would be a really good fit for him. Honestly, with how good Acciari is defensively, O'Connor can be like that offensive presence on that line. Maybe he plays with Nieto. Maybe he plays with Mikhail Granlund on another line. And if Granlund is on the team and he can just pass the puck to O'Connor, who can maybe finish in the back of the net numerous times, that would be interesting as well. But, he's at the point now where it's time for the Penguins to see what they have in him. He's not in one of those quote unquote peak years anymore. That's usually during your age 22 to 24 seasons. He's still kind of in the quote unquote prime of his career, but it's not one of those peak years that you usually see players break out. But I'm excited about him. I think he definitely has a spot on this team for this upcoming season, and I do expect the Penguins to settle this case well before the arbitration date, whenever that is, between July 20th and August 4th. If these two sides are going to arbitration over a contract that's going to be likely in the range of $900K to $1 million, 1.1, 1.2 million on the high end, there are problems. That is ridiculous. Again, you don't really see cases go to arbitration that often now because it's just a big hassle. That's really the best explanation I can give to yinz. It's a huge hassle with the player and the team arguing their sides to a third-party arbiter, and then that person has to side with either the team or the player. And sometimes if the arbiter sides with a player, the team gets really upset. It's a mess. And I don't expect Kyle Dubas and company to really go down that road with Drew O'Connor. So this means a lot of things in the short-term future for the Penguins, especially with the buyouts. That means with the Erik Karlsson trade, all that stuff. But also in terms of O'Connor's future with this team, I see him as a full-time forward next season. And I don't think there's any, what's the word I'm looking for here? There's no reason to think that he can't score double-digit goals for the Penguins this upcoming season. So that's what that means for the Penguins. Let me know what you think O'Connor is going to get with his next contract. And let me know down in the comments. You can also send me a DM on social media and all that good stuff. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into how the Penguins stack up to other teams in the Metropolitan Division, considering a lot of teams in Metro have gotten better this offseason, namely the Hurricanes and the Devils. But before we get into that, we do have to discuss FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll win $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run. It's all an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball and Locked On. And I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember, follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So with that said, let's get into my Metropolitan Division rankings post July 1. And kicking things off are the New Jersey Devils at the number 1 spot. This team is a Stanley Cup contender heading into the season. They just re-signed Timo Meier to an 8-year deal, $8.8 million per season. For someone who ranks in the 96th percentile for 5-on-5 even strength offense and the 78th percentile for 5-on-5 even strength defense, that is a steal for them. He didn't put up the best numbers in the playoffs, but I do think that's going to change going into next season when the Devils make the playoffs. the fact that he's not making over $9 million per season is crazy. The only player that makes $9 million or more on the Devils right now is Dougie Hamilton. Tom Fitzgerald has done a tremendous job building this team to what it is now. Heck, Jack Hughes, he only makes $8 million per season, and he just had 99 points in 78 games this year. They also have Nico Hischier locked up at a very reasonable $7.25 million per season, right? He's one of the best two-way centers in the league. They just traded for Tyler Toffoli, who's coming off a 34-goal, 73-point campaign. This team is loaded. They still have Andre Palat outside of Hamilton on defense. They have John Marino, Jonas Siegenthaler, Colin Miller. In goal, they have Akira Schmidt, who is the goaltender of the present and the future. They're pairing him with Vitek Vanacek. They can also decide to trade for Connor Hellebuck if they choose to, who has one more year left on his contract at $6 million per season. But this team is going to be a huge problem, not just in the Metropolitan Division this upcoming season, but around the league as a whole. The Penguins didn't even beat the Devils this past season. I think it's going to be that much harder for them to beat the Devils this upcoming season with how loaded they are, not just at forward, but on defense. And they have a stud in goal. And oh yeah, they still have $5.6 million in cap space to play with this offseason. They may not be done in the slightest. Coming up at number 2 are the Carolina Hurricanes, the team that won the Metropolitan Division this past season. They were pretty busy. On July 1, they signed Michael Bunting to a 3-year deal, $4.5 million per season. I think he's good for at least 20 goals for them, playing on the second line, maybe on the third line. They also signed Dmitry Orlov to play either on the first or the second pairing, 2-year deal, $7.75 million per season. They're getting Andrei Svechnikov back this season after he tore his ACL. That's going to be a huge return for the Hurricanes. You could tell they were definitely missing him during the playoffs, even though they got all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. In goal, they brought back Anderson and Ranta. If they are just average goalies, that should be good enough for the Hurricanes. They brought back Captain Jordan Stahl on a 4-year term, $2.9 million per season. That should be his final contract as an NHL player. They also re-signed Jesper Foss. They're still involved in the Erik Karlsson sweepstakes, and they're going to be getting Tony DeAngelo back from the Flyers over the next couple of days. So this team, in it to win it as well. I think it's kind of like a 1A, 1B with the Devils and the Hurricanes in the Metro. You can make a case for either one, but right now I have the Hurricanes just below the Devils in terms of the Metropolitan Division hierarchy. Coming in at number 3, though, is a team that I have a hard time evaluating, and that is the New York Rangers. There's no denying that they have a lot of talent at every position. Artemi Panarin is one of the best left wingers in the sport. Mika Zibanejad, really good top 6 center. I don't think he's an elite number 1 center on a cup contending team, but he is still very good production-wise. They have Adam Fox, a absolute stud at defense, a top 3 defenseman in the league. And oh yeah, they have one of the 2 best goaltenders in the league in Igor Shesterkin. But with the Rangers, it kind of just seems like they're falling back into old habits where they're just relying on their goalie to carry them to the promised land. That's what they did during the Henrik Lundqvist era, and it's what they're doing now. Because when you go back and watch their playoff games from this past year, a lot of their top guys no-showed. Artemi Panarin barely did anything. Mika Zibanejad was in Nico Hischier's back pocket with the way he was shut down. Adam Fox was okay, but okay is not going to cut it. Vince Trocheck wasn't as good as people thought he was going to be either. Chris Kreider, he was actually one of their better players, but when it's just him and maybe Adam Fox and Igor Shesterkin doing the heavy lifting, that's not good enough, especially for a team that has Panarin making over $11 million per season and Zibanejad making $8.5 million per season. That's not good enough. During free agency, they went out and signed Blake Wheeler, $800K. Okay, whatever. He'll probably pop them 17 to 18 goals this upcoming season, but his legs are kind of gone. They can probably put him on a 3rd-line role. Okay, Nick Bonino, whatever, 35 years old, $800K contract. They brought in Tyler Pitlick, Eric Gustafsson, who can bring at least a little bit of offense to the table, $825K. But again, with the Rangers, it all relies on Shesterkin and especially their kids panning out. It's time for Alexei Lafreniere to actually show people that he was worthy of being the number 1 overall pick just a few seasons ago, because so far he has not shown that. So far, he's basically just been a third liner in the NHL. That's not good enough. Capo Caco. It's time for him to show why he was also a top 3 pick in the draft a few seasons ago. Philip Hedl is probably the best of those guys. I'm curious to see how he does, but the Rangers, right now, they don't scream to me cup contender. They just scream to me a playoff team. They could turn into a cup contender if maybe a couple of other moves are made. I think they're probably going to bridge Keandre Miller, who I think is one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. They'll probably bridge Lafreniere as well. But right now, I just see them as a playoff team. I kind of see them closer to the Penguins right now, who are the number 4 team in the Metro, in my opinion. Great top 6, obviously. Bottom 6 could still use another score, but it's better than last year's bottom 6. Big questions in goal with Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith. They obviously have Alex Nedeljkovic. Defensively, Chris Letang's amazing. Marcus Pettersson's great. So some other question marks down there. Is Jeff Petrie going to be on the team? Ryan Graves is there now. He'll bring you some offense, some decent defensive zone impacts, really good in transition. But I have the Penguins right now as a wild card team heading into this upcoming season. As my number 5 team, I have the New York Islanders. I'm honestly not that crazy about the Islanders heading into the season, but I'm also never crazy about the Islanders heading into any season. I thought they got extremely lucky to make the playoffs this past season. They only made the playoffs because the Penguins screwed up and couldn't even beat the freaking Chicago Blackhawks on the second to last game of the season. And when you look at their moves that they made, they gave a lot of term to Pierre Engvall. I mean, fine player. He can score. He has 17 goals, but 7 years for him. Okay. Scott Mayfield gets a lot of term as well. Someone who can play on the right side of your second pairing. In my opinion, though, he's kind of just a third pairing defenseman. That's a little too much, but also Lou Lamoriello is not going to be there at that point. They have Matt Barzal, who is a amazing playmaker. Bo Horvat, also very good, signed for a lot of years. He needs to play a bit better because down the stretch and in the playoffs, he was a ghost for the Islanders. If he can turn back into the player that we saw from him in the first half of the season when he was with the Vancouver Canucks and putting up very good numbers and very good underlines, that's going to be a good contract for the Islanders. Anders Lee, one of the best net front presences in the league, but I still think they need another scorer. Defensively, they're good with Pelech and Pulak, but right now I have them outside looking in when it comes to the top 4 in the Metro. And yes, I know Ilya Sorokin is one of the top 5 best goalies, in the league. I hate that he is going to be on the Islanders for the next 8+ years. It's going to be super annoying going up against him and Igor Shesterkin for probably the next decade. That's what Penguins fans have to look forward to here. So I hope you all that are listening to / watching this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast are really looking forward to that. My number 6 team are the Washington Capitals. Alex Ovechkin's back in the fold. Nicholas Backstrom is there too. TJ Oshie, John Wilson, Evgeny Kuznetsov. If he's not traded, they brought in Max Pacioretty, which I think is a very high risk, high reward signing. Someone who, if he's not hurt, he can give them potentially 20 goals this upcoming season. Really curious to see how Rasmus Sandin does in a top 4 role. The Maple Leafs traded him to Washington at the trade deadline. I think you may see a big breakout from him. The Capitals, I think, are in the market for another player to play in their top 6. Really curious to see what other moves they make. I don't think they're done in the slightest. They also got Joe Edmondson this offseason, but I think he's just kind of a defensive defenseman at this point, someone you can plug in on your third pair on the left side. But right now, I don't see the Capitals as a playoff team, but that can change if other moves are made. Final 2 teams, the Blue Jackets and the Flyers. The Blue Jackets, they're funny because the way Jarmo Kekalainen is making moves, you would think that they are trying to make the playoffs this upcoming season, not rebuilding. But the thing is, they should be still kind of trying to rebuild / retool it. I understand that may not be that big of an option because Johnny Gaudreau just signed there last year, but they don't have the pieces to contend for a playoff spot right now. You look at their forward group. Okay, Johnny Gaudreau, he's awesome. Patrick Laine, he'll score you goals. Outside of that, who was really a big difference maker there? Jack Roslovic, Boone Jenner, Cole Sillinger, Kent Johnson, Liam Foudy. I don't really see many other difference makers there. Defensively, they'll be getting back Zach Werenski, which is huge. He's another very good defenseman in the NHL. They traded for the rights and then signed Damon Severson to an 8-year term for $6.25 million per season. That's a high ticket. Rebuilding teams usually don't make those kind of investments. They also traded for Ivan Provorov, so they got him on the left side. Goaltending wise, they had Elvis Merzlikins starting, and they also just hired Mike Babcock on a 2-year term. So again, I don't know what the Blue Jackets are doing. I think Jarmo Kekalainen is just making moves to try and save his job. They are not close to contending for a playoff spot right now, and that's why I have them as my number 17 in the Metro. And number 8, I have the Philadelphia Flyers, a team that is obviously committed to rebuilding. They shipped off Kevin Hayes via trade to the St. Louis Blues. There's rumors that they could be shipping off Travis Sanheim. Another trade, they could ship off Travis Konechny as well. Maybe Carter Hart. I do not think GM Danny Briere is done in the slightest. I don't think they're going to be a good team at all this upcoming season, though. They do have Ryan Poehling there, so that those games against the Flyers should be fun from that aspect alone. But those are my Metropolitan Division power rankings post July 1. Let me know what you think about those down in the comments on YouTube, or you can send me a DM on social media if you're listening via Spotify, Apple, Sirius XM, or Amazon Music. Where do you see the Penguins at in the Metropolitan Division right now? That's the big question I have for you all. To end the show, we're going to get into Patric Hornqvist's retirement and just honoring him, because what a career he had. That's coming up right after this. And I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So this was hinted at last week, but Patric Hornqvist made it official on Wednesday, announcing his retirement from the NHL after 15 amazing seasons with the Predators, Penguins, and most recently the Florida Panthers. Finished his career with 264 goals and 543 points in 901 career games. Obviously won the Stanley Cup twice with the Penguins, scored the Stanley Cup clinching goal against his old team in the Nashville Predators during the 2017 Cup run. And the best part about that goal, it came from his office right at the front of the net. And that's what I'm going to remember most about Patric Hornqvist. When he was in his prime, there was not a better net front presence in the NHL than him. 5-on-5 and on the power play. One of the reasons why the Penguins power play was so good during that time was because Hornqvist would park his butt right in front of the net and get so many garbage time goals, and no one could stop him. Even though he was cross-checked so many times, tripped so many times, slashed so many times, he would still get up, think it was nothing, score, and then laugh in your face about it. And the way he would also piss off so many fans of other Metropolitan Division teams like the Flyers, like the Capitals, like the Islanders, like the Rangers. Man, what a time to be alive when Patric Hornqvist was doing his thing with the Penguins. I know he scored so many amazing goals for the Penguins during his tenure. Outside of the cup clincher in Nashville and the empty netter in San Jose, the goal that I will remember Hornqvist the most for was in Game 4 against the Capitals, 2016 second round. Penguins were up in the series 2-1. They're playing this game without Chris Letang. And when the Penguins needed him most, Patric Hornqvist came through to deliver the Penguins a 3-1 series lead, and a lead that they would not relinquish. They would win that series in 6 games. But that goal really made me realize that this team was for real and that this could be a special run in the city of Pittsburgh. Everyone, I think, expected them to beat the Rangers because that Rangers team was really bad. But with the Capitals, it was kind of like a 50-50 coin flip. The Capitals were a really good team during that regular season, but the Penguins were flying high after the second half that they had. And when Hornqvist scored that goal, thanks to Mike Weber, of course, who dished the puck to him on a silver platter, 5-hole and Braden Holtby, I was like, oh yeah, this team is for real. And sure enough, they went on to win the cup that year. He was also someone, I think, who really changed the culture of the Penguins. Obviously, the leadership group of 87, 71, and 58 is one of the best out there. But at the time when he was acquired, there were really no other big leaders in that locker room. You can say Chris Kunitz was, that's fair. Maybe Pascal Dupuis at the time. But outside of that, there was really no one else that was going to step up and say something when something needed to be said. And Hornqvist became that guy. It was one of the many reasons why he was such a huge fan favorite during his time in Pittsburgh. He will be Penguin royalty forever. And remember, he was the first official trade that Jim Rutherford made when he took over the Penguins. Traded James Neal for Patric Hornqvist. That was after the Penguins lost that 3-1 series lead against the Rangers in the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs. And he kicked off, honestly, a new era of Penguins hockey. And I remember exactly where I was when that trade was going down. I was getting hibachi with my mom, stepdad, and my sister. And my mom is someone who, she doesn't like when we're on our phones during dinner, at least at the time. And she saw me on it and she was giving me like this cold death stare. And I told her, I'm like, no, like the Penguins might be making a trade here. It looks like David Boyle and Jim Rutherford are having like a big conversation on the draft floor. And she looked at me, she was like, okay, you can be on your phone. And I that was the thing I remember most about that night, outside of going home, quickly writing an article for eDraft.com. That's who I wrote for at the time. And when I pulled up his film, I fell in love with this player. And sure enough, he played the exact same way with the Penguins and also with the Panthers after he was traded to Florida for Mike Matheson. So Patric, congratulations on one hell of a career. You will always, and I mean this 110%, you will always be Penguins royalty. But that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to / watching this episode of the podcast. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday. I will be away starting later today for the next 8 or 9 days. So the next 5 or 6 episodes, I will be in a different location on my laptop. I will not be on my PC, but I will still churn out content for you all. We'll see if the Penguins make any more moves over the next week and change. Maybe Erik Karlsson comes to Pittsburgh. Maybe something else happens. We'll just have to see. But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday.